All right, Miss Vasquez, thank you very much for coming in today. Appreciate it. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here on a Friday nonetheless. Happy Friday to all my friends and non-friends and everyone else.
Happy Friday. I was telling my class last period that I think this stretch in the school year is one of the most difficult stretches because you've got so much going on. You got the musical that just started. You've got Silent Night tonight. It's been a couple weeks in a row where it's 5-day weeks, which I think, it gets exhausting. It's cold out. Half the class is sniffling. I asked them what they're doing this weekend. All they said was sleep. Yeah. So I'm hoping that we can catch up on some sleep this weekend because it is, it's been a long week, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like this, I don't know, I've been talking to Rob Hubick about this as well. Like he was like, this time between, like basically before we enter February, we don't see spring break yet. Like we're technically, I can count down the weeks till spring break, but it hurts a lot more. But once we're in February, it doesn't sting as much. Like, 5 weeks until spring break. That's a little bit better than 8.
Yeah, you're right. And no signs of snow days, 2-hour delays, nothing like that in the near future, it doesn't seem like.
I don't think so. And that's like, it's just like, okay, we're here.
So
we're existing.
Did you ever have any snow days when you were in California growing up? Was snow like a foreign thing for you?
So snow was like an urban myth. Like it was literally an urban legend. So like I'm from Palo Alto, and in the late 80s, there was snow to where there was like kind of a snow day. So everyone will be like, there was once a snow day. Once there was a snow day in the 80s. Like we would have hail, but then nothing would happen. When I was older in college, we didn't have snow days, we had fire days, and they were much less fun because it was, please don't go outside, we are deciding to cancel athletic events, we're deciding to cancel school because the air quality is too bad. So we would have natural event days, but they weren't fun.
It's terrifying.
It was terrifying. Yes, exactly.
Wow. Not even like flurries or heavy rain that's dangerous to drive in. It's just always pretty nice in Palo Alto.
Yes. My freshman year of college, there were bad enough rains that they canceled finals, and that was like a big deal.
That is a big deal.
And it was a huge deal. And there was concerns about flooding, and I remember my first school was Sonoma State, so I was like, Sonoma State is about an hour and a half away from Palo Alto. So my parents were like, okay, are you going to drive home? When are you going to drive home? All of these things, please be careful. But yeah, like the weather is nice enough that this is a huge deal. And like some people will remember it with fondness, or perhaps professors will remember it with anger.
Yeah. I remember I think my sophomore year of college, we were supposed to go out. It was like really exciting because we never gone to California we're going to California as a team to play Notre Dame in San Francisco. At one of my friends, a couple guys on my team went to what's the high school in San Francisco? So here's where I'm drawing blanks on a Friday, but it's I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's a high school in San Francisco, and I think it's known for it's a really good school, but it's known for its sports too. So they have a big athletic complex, and we were supposed to go out there and play a game, and the whole trip got canceled because of the wildfires. There were really bad wildfires, I think in 2016 maybe or 17. Yeah. So that happens really often out there.
Yeah, and of course with global warming and things, it's gotten worse, and things are climate change. But I remember it was less of a big deal, or we were more removed from it when I was younger. And the older I've gotten, and maybe there is like a trend of like maturity and awareness, but it has definitely gotten worse.
Yeah.
Over the years.
So do you get back out to California much now?
When I was in school, or like when I was in grad school, so I did grad school at University of Washington, so Seattle, I was able to go home a little bit more often. Ever since moving moving to Baltimore, I haven't gone back as much. I went for winter break. The Thanksgiving break was just a little bit too short. It didn't feel reasonable to go. Like you're in Philly, right? Or like outside of Philly, like it's easier for you. Like it's like, almost like a plane would be ridiculous. Like a drive is more reasonable, whereas it's like, okay, I need to commit a whole day to go there and then a whole day to go back.
Well, it's really expensive too.
Yeah.
My sister lives out in Tacoma, Washington, and I've been trying to get out there. I've never been to Washington before,
Yeah.
but the flights prices are insane.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
it's awful. So then you add that, and it's like, okay, well, is this really worth this much? And I love my parents. I love them very much. I can talk to them on the phone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like going to school in Washington?
It was good. It was hard. So I was doing my master's in pure math. So I joke to people that there's like that Legally Blonde scene right after she sends in her admissions video, and the admissions committee is like, do you think she just woke up one day and said, I'm going to go to law school? And that's kind of how I was when I decided to go to grad school. I was kind of like, maybe I'll just go to grad school. So it was like a really hard adjustment because I didn't really think too much about the process in there and then coming in. When you have seasonal depression in California, it doesn't get worse when you move to Seattle, where it's overcast more often and the days are shorter in the winter. So it was a really hard adjustment. The school that I got my degree from, I learned a lot. It was rigorous. UW is like a whole other level. So it was just this change in rigor that I just wasn't expecting, and it just made me realize I don't love math. I don't love math enough to commit to the idea of like a PhD or to commit to studying it for the rest of my life. So it was like this hard mourning moment for me of like, this isn't what I want to do. So it was like hard because of that.
Got it. Okay. So,
but it's really green and beautiful.
Yeah, when it's nice out, right? When it's not rainy.
Oh, the summer is awesome because also like that round earth thing, the days are short in the winter and the days are so long in the summer. So it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It was just hard for me emotionally to be there because I was like realizing this isn't where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Professionally.
Makes sense. So when you first went, did you have in your mind that might become a math professor someday?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the goal was, I'll get a PhD, I'll teach math at a college level, all of that stuff. And then it just was like, first of all, I just don't like math enough. I'm struggling in these classes and I don't love it enough to work through the struggle. Like I'll work through the struggle to get there, but I'm not relishing in it. And then I was like, the best part of my day is TAing. Like I only love
interacting with
students, being a teaching assistant, like teaching the class or like helping teach the class and stuff like that. And then I was like, so maybe I shouldn't be trying to follow a track that has me doing this research and this math part. And maybe I should be focusing on the other part.
Makes sense. So when you were in college, and did you study math in college too? So maybe you didn't realize this in college because it was manageable and you were in the right place with people who were on your level.
Exactly.
But when you go to a master's program like this, it sounds like master's in pure math. These people love math to an extreme degree.
100% that. And also, actually, I graduated in winter of 2019. If you had talked to Camila Vasquez of 2018 almost any time, she would have said, I am going to a teaching credential program. I wanted to teach high school. And not only am I going into a teaching credential program, I know exactly what high school I'm going to teach at. I'm going to teach at my old high school. I'm going to take on the role of being director of the speech and debate program. Like I had it all planned out. And then one professor was like, what about grad school? What if you really love algebra and you want to teach kids algebra? And maybe not even kids anymore, but like young adults, like college students. And I just was like, okay, well, what can it hurt to try? So then that was kind of like the path. So like a few years before then, I was actually gung-ho to teach at the high school level. And then I sort of took a detour.
Gotcha. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your high school, because I've heard about Palo Alto High School. I know it's it's kind of a big deal out there, right? It's a public school, but it's right in Palo Alto, right across the street from Stanford, I believe, right? Yeah. So what is it like? What was it like there for you to go there, and did you enjoy your high school experience?
Yeah, so Palo Alto High School, or Paly, as we commonly called it, for those in the know, it was really interesting. It was an interesting experience. I actually wasn't supposed to go to Paly. I was supposed to go to Gunn High School, which is like our neighboring, like in the same city. My sister graduated from Gunn High School, and Gunn is much more high stress. And Paly is also a high stress, high performing environment. And I saw my sister go through what she went in high school, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go through that. And my sister's like 7 or 8 years older than me, so I also dramatized it. I was in 4th grade, and I was seeing all of these things, and I just didn't really understand how to process them. But I interpreted this as sort of, I don't want to be at this school. I want to go somewhere else. So I went to Paly. It was good. It was just really hard, like being in such a driven, high motivated space was in a high stress and high intensity space. I remember having conversations with my friends that were like, oh, well, I don't know if I like my 2240 SAT score. And this was when the SAT was still at a 2400.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, friend, I got an 1800.
Right.
And sort of being in that space was hard. And I know when I made my choice that I was going to go to Sonoma State, I got weird looks from teachers and stuff. So in the California college university system, we have like the California State universities, we have the UC system in both of our public like schools, and the UCs are viewed as of higher quality and higher caliber, and that's not entirely true for a wide variety of reasons, but that's what the general consensus is. So when people were like, oh, well, you got into a UC, but you went to a CSU, I can't believe you would do that. And I was like, well, because I felt good at my school. Because I walked onto that campus and I felt like I could belong, whereas when I walked onto other campuses, I felt like I couldn't. So I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
So that was just hard. It was different. I think I made friends there. I felt like I belonged. I did a lot of speech and debate stuff there, and that really like got me through it. And that's where I met my mentor, who's been mentoring me both actively and casually since then. She's been basically one of the most consistent adults in my life. But yeah, it was different.
I can imagine having Stanford, and I've been to Stanford, it's right across the street.
Yes, it's right across the street.
I can imagine that had a huge impact on the competitive spirit of Palo Alto, in addition probably to just the area in general.
Yeah, no, it added a lot of competitive spirit. It was actually part of like my being at Stanford, that's not my being at Stanford, my being at Paly was like, when I came to Gilman and I like walked into these spaces, I was like, oh, I am familiar with the stress that these students are under. I have lived this stress. This is a stress that I find a kindred spirit in. And some students take their stress in a very different way than how I handled my stress. But yeah, like this is not a new environment, and this high performance need or drive is not new to me.
Yeah.
But it is very similar to that of Gilman at times.
So you were very much involved in speech and debate in high school and beyond.
Yeah.
Why did that interest you? I want to talk about math too, but speech and debate seems like a passion of yours.
Yeah. I was a big speechy, is what we called them.
Paly speechy. Yeah,
I was a Paly speechy. That's exactly what I was. So I started speech and debate my sophomore year of high school. I had a friend who was like, Camila, she was trying to recruit me for impromptu, which we gave an assembly about, but that was where you have 2 minutes to prep a 5-minute speech. And she was like, you would love that. You can talk about whatever you want. And in the state of California, we have a whole bunch of other events. The way I like to think about speech and debate is it's like track and field, where this is like their umbrella terms and they're these sub-events that sort of like more details, and all of these things. In the state of California, there are more events than Maryland, than a lot of other states. There's this event called Original Prose and Poetry, where you would write and perform a 10-minute piece, either prose or poetry. A lot of people turned it into miniature plays, and I wrote about whatever I wanted to. Like most of the time my pieces were like stream of consciousness, humorous, processing, and I would perform them like
10 minutes?
10 minutes memorized.
Wow.
And blocked, like acted out and stuff.
You see, I would like to do something like that in my English classes, but 10 minutes seems like
10 minutes is a really long time.
It's a long time.
It's a really, really long time. And like we would work on one piece each year. So like you would write one piece in August or September, and then that would carry you through. You would go to competitions with it. You would work on it. You would work on blocking, you would work on delivery, you would work on mood, you would work on like the acting component of it, and you would also work on the writing component of it, of like, oh, yeah, I can't say damn anymore. Like the judges are getting mad at me. Like I need to figure out another word to replace this. And that really took me through. I kind of like, was this as cool in sophomore year, junior year? I was on like management, or like I was like on leadership with that team, with the club. My senior year, I kind of became like an assistant coach. And then at the time, the director of the Bay program was like, okay, well, if you go to school locally, we'd love to have you coach for us. And then there was one day where I like drove for a travel tournament. And then when my time at Sonoma State came to an end and I went to community college nearby my home, I was a coach for them. And then the director was like, I want to make you assistant director because we know that this is something that you want to do. And at some point she was like planning on training me essentially to take her role.
So these exercises that you come up with or give out when you're a coach,
Yeah.
What are some of those exercises? I like the idea of writing a 2-minute speech in 5 minutes or something like that. But how do you, I guess, get a group of people to focus on something specifically that they can give a speech or do a debate about?
Yeah. So when I'm doing speech club or debate club at Gilman, I use like a random topic generator, and I'll say, okay, of these 3 topics, you have 2 minutes, prepare a speech. And as a group, we'll do that. And sometimes they will give a speech, and sometimes it'll just be, okay, what would have been your 3 main points? A lot of impromptu speaking is basically co-opting classic, somewhat dated English practices of we're just going to do a 5-paragraph essay of like, these are the 3 points. Here's an intro. Here's a conclusion. Because that's the easiest format to sort of hold on to in your mind, especially in that like limited 2-minute prep time. I'm also highly aware of all of my ums and likes in this moment because I'm highly aware of filler words. We used to do a drill. I haven't done this at Gilman, where everyone would have crumpled up pieces of paper. It was a snowball drill. So then a brave, confident person would come up and stand and give their impromptu speech. And every time they said a filler word, you got to throw pieces of paper at them.
I like that.
Which I've always been hesitant to do as the adult in the room, but I always loved to do when I was a kid in the room. So perhaps today I'll do that with a brave
I think that's
volunteer.
Awesome. So I think this whole topic of having to deliver a speech to a group of people is going to become even more important because, you know, I'm thinking about the ChatGPT and the fact that you could that's just part of the reality now, is that you could just write in topics on this thing and it will generate an essay for you. And yeah, you could change it around, you can add your own flair to it, but the fact is that ChatGPT exists now, which is, I think, you know, people are talking about how disruptive it is, but I think it is even more so than we think because it's going to get even more impressive. And there probably are versions of it that are more impressive. And I'm trying to think about how, as an English teacher, I could, you know, teach students, like, does it matter that you have to be able to write a 5-paragraph essay now? I think it does, but I'm also aware of this. I'm not going to pretend like ChatGPT doesn't exist. And I think delivering speeches and going up in front of people and not having filler words, which I think the podcast helps me a little bit with that, but I still say like and all that. I think that's an awesome exercise.
Yeah.
For just the reality of today, you know?
Yeah. Can you stay true to the energy or to the faith and to the goal of a 5-paragraph essay, even though, yes, we can have ChatGPT write a pretty solid 5-paragraph essay? Can you deliver an equivalent of a 5-paragraph essay with the acknowledgement and with the knowledge of when you're public speaking, there's things you need to keep in mind, like, of course, the word is leaving my mind, even though I say it all the time, signposting.
Signposting.
Yeah,
okay.
So I use the phrase signposting in the sense that when you're reading an essay, when you're reading any one of your students' essays, if you get lost, you can always rewind a little bit and you can read what happened. In a speech, you can't just rewind.
Mm-hmm.
So someone needs to be like, okay, well, I'm going to be talking about this, this, and this. And then now, okay, well, I'm talking about A. okay, I'm done with A, I'm going to talk about B. And you can do that in a smooth way. You can do that in like a very clunky way, just like how I demonstrated. But the idea is that we need to be able to realize and transform these written things into a delivery that tracks and makes sense for our human brains when we're listening to it, when we're presenting our thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Do you show any model speeches or debates to give students an example of what a really strong speech, for instance, looks like?
I have. There also have been times where I've just been like, let's see what happens. And there are some really strong impromptu speakers and extemporaneous speakers in my Friday debate club, so I don't feel the need to give an example because my example is, all right, watch Nick Lutsky, watch Patrick Ryan. They're going to give you an awesome example. Watch Matthew Chi. Like, they're going to do awesome. And there's going to be, our debate squad is much smaller, so I did have them watch a practice debate. Like, had them watch the Nationals debate because we don't have public forum debaters at this school. So I couldn't give a practice debate. But hopefully next year I'll be able to say, okay, I don't even know off the top of my head, but I want these two debaters to debate one of their favorite resolutions of last year as an example for the previous, like for these new kids to see what's going on.
So how big is how many students are in this debate club here?
Yeah. It varies by day. We have a really small speech squad. So far it's 3 kids in the speech group. We have limited prep events that's a little bit larger. It's like 5, and I think there's like 10 or 12 who come regularly to debate.
So I've been doing the advising for Model UN, and it sounds very similar because you're kind of doing the same thing. You've got a country and then a topic or a issue in that country, and you have to debate it. You have to talk about it. And we just did a Model UN conference at Yale this past weekend, which actually went really, really well. I think they enjoyed it, and I think, I've been impressed with the Model UN crew because a lot of these students, they've got things that they're passionate about. They're really smart. They enjoy working on the issues and learning about the issues. I think that Gilman does a really good job providing a lot of different opportunities for the type of kids that like, maybe not competition in the athletic on the field type of way, but competition in trying to figure out the truth of issues and what's better for the future. And I've enjoyed it. I kind of got thrown into that position as Model UN advisor, but it's been pretty cool to be a part of.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that Model UN and debate kind of don't really compete, but they do draw from similar types of kids, but also appeal to different kids based on the different, I think they pull from similar groups, and yet we attract different, we're not competing directly, which I think is also kind of nice. It's sort of, okay, well, if you're really interested in thinking about these kinds of things, maybe Model UN might be a better fit for you. Or if you're really not that interested in this, maybe debate would be a more interesting. Or mock
trial, maybe.
Or mock trial, too. That also pulls from a similar group. You're so right.
So what types of, I guess you use that idea generator to come up with some issues to debate, but...
Yeah, so I'll use the topic generator to come up with topics to have a speech about. Debating, we have a governing group that is the National Speech and Debate Association, and they release topics about every month or 2 months. So we just had kids at a tournament debating the United States should increase its diplomatic efforts to resolve internal armed conflict in West Asia. So that is not a resolution that I came up with. That is a resolution that the National Speech and Debate Association came up with, and that is a thing that they debated about. Currently, we are focusing on the resolution. In the United States, right-to-work laws have done more harm than good, which is really interesting because we had to dive into what are unions, what are right-to-work laws, what does it mean for being a right-to-work state, and sort of diving into what that resolution really does end up boiling down to. Last year, I was really excited about this resolution. What's fascinating to me is that the kids were way less impressed by it. It was about great power competition. So it was something basically there are more benefits than harms with the United States involvement in the United States strategy of great power competition has had more benefits than harms. And then we get to have a conversation of like, well, what do we mean by benefits and harms? Who is benefiting? Who is being harmed? We can talk about this from an international point, from a national point, there's so many arguments that can be framed, which I thought was so cool. And I think that also speaks to my first love debate, which was Lincoln Douglas, which is very values-based and philosophy-based. And we think a lot about, well, should this be happening? How are we going to frame this debate? Whereas I think the kids were more like, okay, well, I just don't want to think about how we're going to frame the debate. I just want to have a debate right now.
So a lot of these issues that come up, they're not just, light issues. They're real issues that are happening in the country and in the world that you have to do a lot of research and learn a lot of different aspects of before you engage in conversation.
Both myself and the kids. Like I know a little bit about unions, but I don't know enough about unions to explain the resolution. So I had to do research about that, and I had to do research about great power competition. And these are public forum is a type of debate that was literally invented to talk about current event and talk about current topics many years ago. And this is one of my favorite resolutions. It was right when Catalonia was having their independence vote, and it was should Spain grant Catalonia independence? That was literally what these high schoolers were debating. And of course there's just a lot of nuances there. Obviously, no matter how much research you do, when you have a month of that research, you can't even start to understand the depth of history that is Catalonia and Spain in general. But I just remember that entire resolution was just so cool. And it really was oh, that's such a cool resolution, because literally in the next year, that resolution doesn't matter anymore. Whereas these current resolutions, probably there will be an ongoing conversation about all of them, which is still really cool. But I don't know, I think there's something really magical and really wild about the idea of there's a resolution that you can only debate in a certain time frame, because in a year it'll be old news. Yeah,
that's fascinating. That's cool. So it seems like your interest in math, your love for math, and your passion for speech and debate, usually those two sides of the brain are kind of an unlikely combination.
Yeah. I have said this to my students, so I don't feel bad about saying this on the air, on the record, is I hated math when I was in high school. In middle school in the state of California, I actually really don't know if this is true, and I don't know how I found this out. At some point, I decided that I could get my parents to excuse me from any math after Algebra 2 if they just signed a piece of paper. And I probably, because it's a public school, because it's all of these things, they could have, that probably is a true thing. But I tried to get my parents to excuse me. I did not want to take anything after Algebra 2. That's how much I hated math. And my dad very wisely said, you should wait a year. Hold on a year. Because he knew that I would forget about it, which I did. But I really, really hated math. I did not like math in high school. When I went to Sonoma State, I took modern geometry, which was basically the equivalent of the geometry class we take sophomore year in high school.
Did you have to? Room. Was it like for a
general? It was like a general ed requirement. I could have gotten away with not taking it. I could have taken some other stats or econ type class. And I said, this is the last math class I'm ever going to take in my life. And I loved it.
Really?
It was incredible. So these 2-column proofs that we learned about in sophomore year, those aren't real proofs. Proofs are a story. And I think that spoke to me a lot about, we're just writing a story, we're writing an argument. That spoke to that speech and debate part of me in a more logical way. I don't even need to worry about silly things like what other people have to say to me or what reasonable arguments someone might have. I can just make my argument based firmly in logic. And that was beautiful to me and incredible. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And I remember that class, my professor was like, why aren't you a math major? Because at the time I had just declared an anthropology major. And I was like, well, math is too hard. And he was like, you're able to do the math part. The math part is not hard for you.
So the proofs that you were doing, and this is in college,
Yeah.
the proofs you were doing were more black and white,
Black
but
and
still had
white.
the element of argument
Yes.
within them.
Yes. And like, I don't have any more of the things anymore because I probably, unless I'm still, I think my mom at some point got rid of all of these old homework assignments because she got tired of having all these papers around. But I probably could walk into honors geometry. I could walk into a geometry class at this school, and I bet that there was a proof that I wrote, and it would have been very similar to any proof that a student at Gilman in one of those classes wrote, just in an essay format instead of a 2-column proof. And I think there was something about that it was like, oh, well, this is familiar but different. Like, this is familiar but challenging. I'm forcing myself to turn these bullet points into a real sentence, into an argument, into all of these things. And I just thought that was so cool and so beautiful. And I was like, man, I missed out on a lot. I spent a lot of time hating this thing when it was really just, it wasn't being taught, or I wasn't being explained to me, or I don't know why.
So was it the teacher that did it, or was it just the fact of
Both.
yeah?
Both. The professor was awesome.
Okay.
The professor was great. Zach Semblin,
So
super cool guy.
So I always think about that as a lot of your love for a subject
Depends on the teacher.
depends on the teacher, and I
Yeah.
think that's really true because I had a physics teacher in high school that he didn't seem that passionate, he didn't seem that into it, he wasn't that excitable. I didn't really get along with him that well, and I don't have any fond memories of physics. When I think if I studied it now and looked at it, like that's really cool. Why does why does the ball rolling in the grass slow down at some point? Or, all of physics I think I could get really, really into now if I had just someone who pushed me a little bit more, got me excited about it.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think the professor really, really like mailed it home. He was awesome. I remember he had like math tattoos, and I was like fascinated by that. I remember it was college. If you're a freshman, you're gonna be a little bit annoying. I remember I showed up in pajamas, and that's like a normal thing. It was like an 8 a.m., 9 a.m. class. It was an early morning class, but he made fun of me, but like in a fun way. He was like, "Oh, this is this," and then when he heard my name, he was like, "Camila, that's like the Star Wars planet." And we just like this was like this running joke. And then a few weeks after I showed up in my pajamas and he made fun of me, he's telling the story of, "Oh yeah, I took my daughters to In-N-Out and I was in my pajamas and I thought to myself, this must be what it's like to be Camila." And it was just so funny, and it was like such a heartwarming environment, and like these little stories that I still distinctly remember so many years ago. He was just an awesome guy. I later saw him and I was too scared to approach him. I went to like a little mini math conference, and he gave a really cool really cool speech, or not speech, he gave a talk. He gave a talk about his most recent research, and I saw him and I was like, I think you were my old professor. But I was like really scared to approach him because he was in big professor,
Gotcha.
big feet mode, and I was like, oh, I don't want to.
Does he know that you became a math teacher?
He knows that I picked up a math major. I don't know if he knows that I became a math teacher.
So how did you, so you went to UW and tried that master's program, and you completed the master's program.
Yeah.
How'd you get to Gilman? What was that story?
Yeah. So this is a very mathematical, analytical story, which is I was like, okay, I don't like how short the days are here. And I was like, and I would joke, I was like, okay, well, I can never live above the 45th parallel. And then I was like, okay, but which parallel can I actually not live above? So then I figured out which latitudinal line resulted in days in the winter that I deemed long enough for me. So basically, like, I wouldn't want to live, I'm sure New Hampshire is a very great state, but I realized that the days are too short for me there. So I like worked my way down, figured out this cutoff line, and then I was like, okay, well, what cities south of this line do I envision myself working at or working in? Baltimore was one of those cities. And when I started my process, I didn't have any guidance because my professors were like, oh, you want to be a high school teacher? That's great. Good for you. we can't really help you. Like, I didn't know about the NAIS job board. I didn't know about AIMS. I didn't know about
because they were all becoming professors.
They were all becoming professors. They were supporting their students get postdocs. They weren't supporting someone trying to get into this field. So what I did is I went to niche.com, which is basically like for parents.
I've heard of Niche.
And I would go through the websites, each individual website, and if there was a math opening, then I would send my resume there. At some point, eventually, I found the NIS job board, and it was like much more streamlined. But my first 10 applications were sent by happenstance, by pure luck of being like, oh, well, I guess I could see myself maybe living in Atlanta. So then going on Niche and saying, Atlanta, this is where I want to. Oh, I could see myself living in Baltimore. And
Did you know anything about Baltimore? Or?
Oh, I knew nothing.
No,
I knew nothing.
You're just like, it's south of that line.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'll figure it out if I get an offer, and I'll see what happens. And then, yeah.
That's cool. So I think 2 things. One is I think it's so true because I went to college in Boston, and the weather is, it has such a profound impact, and you don't think about that. Like, I would think about the students here that are going off to college next year.
Yeah.
That's never a consideration,
No.
is, sometimes, what the weather's like if you're going to Florida or you're going to Texas,
Yeah.
but usually it's like the school. Am I happy at the school? Are the professors good? There's a good social scene. Is it a, well-known school? Am I going to get a good job after? Maybe you're thinking about how much it costs, the finances of it. But the weather, I think, is such, on the day-to-day level, is such a huge aspect and has such an impact on your well-being.
Yeah.
And I experienced that, when I went to this Model UN conference at Yale in New Haven last weekend. I was like, oh my gosh, it's rainy, it's snowy, and this is such a great school. It's a beautiful school, but I knew so many people that were so unhappy in college because of the weather.
No, 100%. Yeah, and then I was just like thinking about that, and I was thinking about my grad school experience, and I was like, okay, in a perfect world, excuse me, this is going to be where I move to start a life. So where do I want to start a life? Do I want to start a life where I know I'm going to be miserable, or do I want to start a life where I can build tools to be less miserable? Because, yeah, Baltimore is sometimes overcast, especially in the winter. I'm not saying that this is the most perfect climate or anything.
No.
But that was something I really seriously thought about, is where do I envision myself potentially long-term, hopefully long-term, thriving.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like, I guess, coming to Baltimore for the first time? What surprised you about it? What was interesting to you about Baltimore? Do you like it?
I love Baltimore. I think Baltimore's awesome. I really love being here. The first time I came here was with my parents. We flew across in June of 2021, maybe July of 2021. That was the first time I stepped foot on Gilman, because I did all my interviewing virtually, because I was straight out of like the big COVID year. That's when I was doing my interviewing. So it was all virtual. And so being there in June, first of all, perfect week to be there. Everyone was joking that we brought the California weather. If you remember June 2021, there was a week, and I'm being silly right now, but like there was this week of beautiful non-mugginess. Brian Ledyard was like, you brought the California weather with you.
There you go. Yeah.
And we were there, and it was really interesting. I grew up in Palo Alto. Is a very white town, and the diversity in Baltimore really struck me in that moment of like, oh, I don't think I've ever been in an actually a diverse place. So that really struck me. Just like the East Coast difference. The same thing was also just like the friendliness of people. Especially coming out of Seattle, people aren't like, the Seattle freeze is real. And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. This is a cool place. I'm excited to be here. And like when we were touring apartments, like the people who were showing us the apartments were always so kind. And I toured a lot of apartments when I was looking for places in Seattle, and they were never that kind. And there were just little things that made it like, wow, this is a cool place to like start to build a community for myself.
Love it. Yeah, it's funny because I don't really see mean, I hear from my sister a little bit about hiking in Tacoma, Seattle area. My sister's in the military out there, so it might be a little bit different, but
Yeah.
I don't think she's really raving about Seattle and Tacoma as a place. Like, I don't think she really loves it.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome place to visit. And I'm happy that I spent 2 years there. And I don't know if I could do more than that.
Yeah. Is Seattle a cool city? Is it a cool town?
Yeah, we've got the Gum Wall. We've got like Pike's Place. Like there are cool things there.
Pike's Place is like the first
Pike's
Starbucks,
Place
right?
Market. Yeah. And like the first Starbucks is a cool thing. I get to joke and be like, oh, I'm shopping locally. There's like cool. I think that like the makeup of Seattle is really cool in the sense that it's just the city that's divided by the sound and we sort of just make it work. And I think that's really cool. I think the bridges are fun, but in general, like,
Yeah.
I like it to visit.
Yeah,
And I will
okay.
be happy. My sister just moved there as well, actually. And I'll be happy to visit her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't plan on living there.
Oh, she moved. Your sister moved there.
Yeah, my sister just moved there. Yeah.
What does she do? Is
She's a professor at the University of Washington.
Oh, right. You told me about her.
Yeah, yeah. So
And she's a very niche area of math or science, right?
something engineering, either bioengineering or chemical engineering. No, I bet you it's bio. I think it's bioengineering. That's her department.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to understand niche.
She studies how cells make tube shapes.
Right. Yeah. And
So-
she's writing a dissertation on that or a paper on that.
She is working on a paper, but also like she's done with dissertations. Like she's living her best life. She's tenure track assistant professor. She's gonna have to write papers for the tenure part, but not for the. She earned that doctor.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
She's full-time. She's full-time professor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what attracted to you about, I guess, Gilman's all boys aspect and
Yeah.
just the culture at Gilman School?
Yeah.
What did you like about it when you first came
Yeah.
here?
So actually, funnily enough, so my undergraduate degree is from Mills College. Mills College doesn't really exist in its current entity anymore. Mills College was a historically women's college. They recently were bought up by Northeastern. Yeah, Northeastern. But I think a lot of my friends were really stunned by this. Why would you go to an all-boys school? Like you're like that. They were very rich in the irony. And honestly, when I started my job search, my dream was to be at an all-girls school in Atlanta, Georgia. Like I had a very specific dream. And then I quickly just was pivoting, and I sent in my application to Gilman, and I had a phone conversation with Jeff Guline. And first he talked about how he supports, how Gilman supports new teachers and all of the things that he was saying about supporting and learning and growing, and basically this idea of you don't need to be a good teacher your first year. We'll help you get you there. You just need to have that factor, and we'll get you to the actual great teacher part. Was really, it brought me a lot of hope and was really validating for me as someone who is naturally an incredibly anxious person, and was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I had a conversation with Brian, and it was just lovely, and it was this community of supporting boys and supporting students to grow. And I thought, okay, if I was going to be at an all-boys school, that's the kind of all-boys school that I would want to go to, where we have conversations about masculinity in a flavor that's not classic toxic masculinity, where we talk about how we're caring for each other in a culture of support and all of these things. And I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? And I can just see what happens. And I came here, and again, it was that culture of support, culture of care. And yeah, my first year I had 2 coordinated classes, and then only 1 all boys class. I was on a 3 class schedule. So there was a little bit of easing into the all boys culture. And I really love it. I'm really happy to be here, and sitting in assembly and seeing the hoisting and all of that stuff. It's strong energy, but it's not overwhelming. And it just, again, we're just supporting each other. And that brings me a lot of joy, in that is a space that I wanted to be in, and or I guess I realized that I wanted to continue being in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know you taught I didn't know there was coordinated classes for the math department.
Yeah, so we have senior classes that are coordinated, some senior classes. So I taught 2 calculus classes, and moving forward, I think there will only be 1 coordinated math class because there's going to be a coordinated math class at Bryn Mawr. But I had 2 coordinated calc classes, and it was awesome. And like, they were just like so kind and supportive and really generous with me as a first-time teacher, as I was learning the ropes, as I was developing curriculum and things like that. It was a great experience.
That's awesome. And it seems like you must teach, I mean, calculus is high level for sure for high school. I think I took calculus either junior or senior year of high school, but it was hard. It was hard for me. But the fact that you have Jeffrey Howard and you have a 2-person class, it seems like you're teaching some really, really high level math classes.
Yeah. I'm teaching like mostly senior and junior level classes, and mostly flavors of calc, and then that post BC Calc or like concurrent BC Calc type elective class. It's actually strongly inspired by all of the combinatorics classes that I took both in undergrad and grad school. I mean, we're using the same textbook that I used. That's what the focus of my master's was. My master's focus was with I did Masters of Science with a concentration in combinatorics.
What is it?
Combinatorics. So combinatorics.
Okay. Math is so out of my wheelhouse.
Let's count things. How can we count things? Like you go to Baskin Robbins, and there's 31 flavors at Baskin Robbins, allegedly. You're gonna get a double scoop because you're feeling like you want a double scoop. How many different flavor combinations are there? But since you're getting a cone, the order matters because you know that mint chocolate chip on top of anything messes up the flavor. So how many distinct flavors are there? That's a really simple introductory combinatorics problem.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But then we just like escalate it, and we're like, okay, well, what if there were N flavors and there's 3 things, but you can't choose mint chocolate chip unless it's in this case, in this case, in this case.
I thought that was, so don't you use factorials for that?
Yeah, exactly. It is factorials. Like some of combinatorics is factorials, right? Actually, just yesterday, we were writing some choose functions. We were making equations and functions that involved combinatorics it didn't involve combinatorics. It involved the permutation, the choose function.
And you can do all this on the graphing calculator, right?
It's just easy.
Plug it in. Do you have to write anything out ever?
Yeah, we write everything.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we just write it on the board. We just do a lot of board work.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then pure math. What is pure math?
Yeah. So we mathematicians.
Pure math.
Someone's gonna get mad at me for saying this, but like, once upon a time, there was a lot of ego floating around in the mathematics community, and there still is some ego, but there was a lot more ego like 100 years ago. And they decided, okay, basically physics or like theoretical physics or just thinking about math as it applies to real life situations, that's not real math. We're going to call that applied math. And then everything else is pure math.
Okay.
So pure math is like the ultimate umbrella term, but we can say like parts of calculus are pure math, or like proving and like justifying parts of calculus are pure math. But the work problems and the related rates problems and the applications, that's a great example of applied math. And I'm saying I'm being very general in this case, but sort of a lot of stats tends to be thought of. Usually we think about this in applied math contexts of like biology or social sciences and things like that. There's a lot of like intersection between biology and mathematics. So like cell growth and things like that, that's applied math. But if we're thinking about, if we have all of these circles and we're like in this space, this book, for example. We're sticking this book, and all of the circles need to be here. What is the maximum amount of circles we can put? That has an application of perhaps like what is the maximum amount of cells we can put on a single layer.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're just talking about packing the circles and we're not thinking about the cells, that can be an example of like the pure math to applied math distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing my studies, there was a lot of just generalization, and we just wouldn't really think about where this applies in any sort of way. We were just like, okay, here's this function, or here's this Galois group, and all of these ridiculous, awful things.
Outside of teaching, has there been a time, maybe recently or just in your life, where you're with a bunch of people and they're trying to figure something out, whether it's like, I don't know, you're building something, you're constructing something, and you're the mathematician in the room, and you've had to lean on a lot of your skills to solve the issue?
I think there was like maybe one time, like, I don't know, they jokingly are like, okay, well, you're going to be in charge of the bill.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to split it up. Like,
Yeah.
I do that a lot. There was one time when I was figuring out my first roommate at the university when I was at UW, we realized our rooms were not the same size. So we were thinking about how can we figure out how we should be splitting rent, because the rooms were not the same size to a very large extent. So we created some sort of like weighting situation, and we got the property manager to measure get the dimensions of each room, so we had square footage and like so I guess like I've done that before, but then at the same time, like I remember that whole situation I solved with like using a spreadsheet, like putting it into Excel.
I think it's really interesting. Some of my friends, when we were applying for jobs, were into the consulting track, and they all did the consulting interviews, which are basically like you sit across from someone. This is, it's probably more complicated than this, but I know that a lot of the questions in a consulting interview are case-based, and someone will ask you like, how many windows are on the Empire State Building? And you have to just sit there and with a sheet of paper come up with an answer for the person.
Yeah.
And, I just always found that fascinating. That's not really how my brain works, but I love kind of hearing stories about people figuring out some number or some range of numbers that they can reply back to the interviewer.
Yeah.
Consulting is just an interesting profession in general to me, because I don't really even know what goes on there. But I think some of the real world problems to this math-minded person are fascinating to learn about.
Oh, 100%. Or how many tennis balls would fit in this room?
Yeah. Like I couldn't even tell you where I would start, but I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So question for you, random, outside of math, outside of school, do you have a favorite movie?
Yeah, The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Really? Nice. Why that one?
Or Clue, the movie. The Muppets Christmas Carol, I watched it once when I was little, and I was like, this is awesome. And so there's two movies growing up. We had a VCR growing up, or a VHS tape. VCR, we would watch VHS tapes. And there were two movies in my life that are the reason I know how to use a VCR, and it is The Muppets Christmas Carol and Legally Blonde. Possibly The Black Cauldron. And possibly some like
Black Cauldron Disney movie?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, there have been like moments in my life where I thought that movie was fake. Like I couldn't believe that movie was there. And then there was like some Arthur like VHS tape. Those were like my 4 top things to consume.
Arthur was great.
Muppets Christmas Carol, it's the greatest version of the Christmas Carol ever to exist. Fun like facts about it that I know is that so Michael Caine plays Scrooge, and this was a movie that was made after Jim Henson died. So Jim Henson's nephew, whose name I don't remember, but Henson the Younger, it was like his first directorial debut, and he was so scared because he was like, oh my god, I'm going to work with Michael Caine. And Michael Caine shows up and he's like, I'm playing this straight. So he is one of the best, and I say this with confidence, he's probably arguably one of the best Scrooges to ever hit the cinematic universe, playing against Kermit the Frog. Like it's brilliant. It's genius. The songs, like the entire music, like the music is every single song is delightful. When they put it on Disney Plus, they cut one of the songs from the movie because the Disney execs decided it was too slow and sad for kids. It's a travesty. I love that movie.
I love how you had one ready to go for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's the go-to answer.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite movie?
Yeah. Not really. We were just talking about Interstellar, though, and that's one of the best movies I've ever seen in theaters because it was just a cool experience, and Chesaree's watching it this weekend. But
Cool.
I don't know if I have a favorite movie, and Jeffrey Howard, when he was on, asked me a favorite book, which is like, I should have a favorite book. I'm an English teacher, English major, English guy, but I always like trip over myself when someone asks me for favorites. Even the question, do you have a favorite podcast? I was like, I've liked all of the podcasts that we've done.
Yeah.
So, but I do like the book recommendation question because you at least get a chance to prepare it and think about it.
Right.
So what did you choose?
So this is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I picked it up at a Barnes & Noble at the start of summer. It's set in 1920s Mexico. And this idea is that this young woman releases, I want to say the Mayan god of death, who has been trapped by his brother. And it's his twin brother, or like his twin brother was trapped him and has taken over the land of the dead. And there's just like this magical realism thing. It also got me thinking a lot about, like I don't really think about 1920s Mexico. I think about 1920s United States. I don't really think about 1920s Mexico. And there's this young woman who's in a very like conservative, patriarchal part of Mexico as she moves to Mexico City, like travels with this god of death. I don't know, it's just like really interesting. This like really beautiful story. It just made me, I loved it, and it brought me a lot of joy to read. And then I couldn't decide because this is also a very meaningful book. Really any Tomie dePaola book.
I've seen that book. I've definitely read that book.
Strega Nona is excellent. Any Tomie dePaola book is one of the greatest books written of all time.
Isn't there one with a frog by him? Or
maybe
I recognize another cover like that.
Probably. I really love Strega Nona. There's another Tomie dePaola book that I didn't have that I wish I could bring, which was like, I think it was Bonjour, Mr. Matisse. I don't know. It's like this whole story is basically we're talking about the battle between Picasso and Matisse, and it was just like really cute, and it made me think about all of that. It's just like a beautiful, I don't know. I love his art. I love his stories. And Tomie dePaola I think he died very recently, but he ended up living in Berkeley, so like right in our neighborhood, or like right in our backyard. And that's always just been cool to sort of be like, oh yeah, real authors are here with me.
I love it.
So like favorite childhood book.
Am I thinking of The Toad and the Frog maybe? Did he write those? Frog and the Toad?
I don't think he wrote The Frog and the Toad.
Okay. The cover kind of looks like the illustrations of that. Cool. Love it.
Yeah.
What's Berkeley like? Never been. I've only heard Brian's talked about it, and I've been to San Francisco, but never over to Berkeley.
Fascinating. Really cool place. Really social justice oriented, really activism oriented. It's really cool to be in a school that kind of centered, like be in a town that built itself around the school, like UC Berkeley or Cal Berkeley, whatever you want to call it, Cal, UC Berkeley, Cal. They were there kind of first, and then the town of Berkeley kind of built itself around it. Mm-hmm. And it's a really cool idea, and it's a really interesting thing because then an argument exists that Berkeley is a college town, and like technically it is, but also it's so much more than that. And I find that kind of beautiful, and like I don't know, I've described so many things as beautiful in the past like hour. That's one of my favorite adjectives.
Love it. Good.
It's a lovely place. It's cool.
College town first, I guess.
College town first, but it's also just more than that, and really cool. Beautiful nature. Yeah.
Well, Camila, thank you very much for coming in today for the book recs, and love the conversation. It was a good time.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much, Jake.
Of course.